Joe Williams, thank you for jumping on the podcast today, man. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, brother. I just had to escape the chaos in my house. I've set myself up in my little boy's room, so looks like I'm sitting down on a little single bed. That's because it's my 10-year-old boy's room that I've just tried to find some quiet shelter away from the chaos of the kids and homeschooling and school holidays and all that sort of mess that we're all in now around the country.
Looking comfortable? Is it actually comfortable?
It is, man. It is. I'm all right, and I've got a couple of blankets on. It's a bit cold out here at the moment in Dubbo. So, always sitting back nice and comfortable, mate. No wonder he doesn't like leaving the room.
Awesome. Well, I like to start my podcast with grateful. So what's something you're grateful for today?
I write down gratitudes every single day. 3 things I write down every single morning. I guess I'm grateful that I can see gratitude as one thing now that comes to the top of my head. For many years, my life was such a chaotic mess that you just maneuvering your way through every day. So now I sit down every morning as a routine and write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And it can be the simplest of things, like having a great sleep. I'm grateful that I can have a great sleep last night. I'm grateful that I've got a warm house. I've got a roof over my head. I've got food in my belly. My dad told me from a young age, if you got plenty to eat and plenty to drink and a roof over your head and clothes on your back, then you got everything you need. And it's something that I've always grown up with. I guess having the emphasis on things that we need rather than things that we want.
Exactly. And it's the small things in life that we sometimes take for granted that we should really be grateful for.
Yeah, hugely. Like my pathway and a lot of the work that I do around mental illness and wellness and suicide prevention and all that sort of stuff. Like back in 2012, I almost wasn't here anymore. So I'm grateful that I get to take a breath every morning. I'm grateful that I get to open my eyes. The smallest of things. I don't need to be grateful for the big things that happen in my life. I'm grateful for the tiniest of things, the connections that I have, the conversations that I have, the ideas that I have. But first and foremost and most importantly, I'm grateful to be alive every day.
Let's go back to your journey. Where did it all begin with your struggles with mental health?
From a young age. The earliest I can remember from it is after a concussion that I had as a 13-year-old. That I'm not sure if you've had a concussion, but many people talk about it in a similar fashion. That when you get these types of head knocks, you get a hell of a lot of insecurity and uncomfortable, not knowing where you are and can't remember, and with that comes some chaos in the head. And on the back of my first concussion, it started a conversation in my head that talked to me like there was somebody sitting there. And it told me I wasn't good enough, that I was never amount to anything, and then I should end my life. Progressively, that's where it got to. It didn't say it right in that instant, but progressively, that's where it got to. And has plagued me like that since then. So as a 13-year-old kid, I had to learn how to develop coping strategies to be able to maneuver my way through these challenging times. And I'm super grateful that I can do that now as I won't say my age, but an older man than I was as a 13-year-old.
You mentioned coping mechanisms. At the age of 13, what did you kind of implement to try and block out those sounds?
Yeah, it was little things like, as a kid growing up, my family was very much about, as Aboriginal people, we're a collectivist society. What we mean by that is that we always look after the next person first. So it was looking at doing things for others. I realized at a very young age that the more I did for other people, the more it helped me. So when I wasn't well, it was about making sure that I was doing things for others, because the more I did for others, the more I was well.
So at 13, you get the head knock, you start having head noises and stuff. What age did you move to the big smoke?
Not till I was just 17. Spent a lot of time as a 16-year-old as well, starting to make that transition. But it wasn't until I was just after I was 17, at the end of the school year, or almost at the end of the school year, in year 11. So, prior to that, it was as a 13-year-old kid, I had to get through 14, 15, 16. I was lucky or unlucky enough to be playing, footy at a decent age as a kid, as a decent level as a kid. I was playing first grade footy in the bush at a young age. And that was the old initiation test back then of when you're playing, first grade as a young kid. So 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, I was playing first grade footy in the bush. The old initiation test if he's old, if he's good enough to be out here, he's old enough to be out here. Let's see if he's tough enough to be out here. And I copped all sorts of nasty head knocks and so forth. Footy isn't anywhere near, wasn't anywhere near as fast and athletic and as modern as it is today. Back then, in the the late 90s, but it was a hell of a lot dirtier. So I copped all sorts of headshots and late shots and knocks around the head. And, with playing at a fairly decent level at a young age, but I was dancing between two worlds, because on Sundays, when it came to footy, I was treated like a man. So there were times where I'll be, sneaking beers at the pub after the home games, and on the bus trip, back from the away games, and but then I was at school and being treated and talked to and looked at as if I was a year 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. Year 8, so in the years 8, 9, and 10 at school, So I was dancing between two worlds. And for me, it was difficult to do that. And with that, the noise inside my head, I built quite a nasty. The addiction process started for me young, and there was all sorts of substance and stuff involved with my youth, and not because I liked it, or I liked the way it made me feel. I didn't like the taste of it. I hated the way it made me feel. It turned me into someone that I didn't like. But it was the only thing that would silence what was going on inside my head. This constant barrage of head noise telling me that I wasn't good enough, that I'd never amount to anything, and that I should end my life. Planning thoughts, plans, and ideas, this stuff from a young age. And the only coping mechanism I had was on the footy field, or trying to run away from it, escape it off the field, of a weekend at school parties and that sort of stuff. That sort of stuff that we all get involved in, But for me, it wasn't about the mischief. It was about the escape from what was happening internally.
And for the listeners who maybe haven't experienced head noise, is it something that as soon as you wake up, you kind of got shit going through your mind, like those things?
Well, think about it, man. Like, we all have head noise. People say, "Oh, I haven't experienced it." Well, we all do. Absolutely every one of us. It tells us we're hungry in the morning. It tells us as soon as we open our eyes in the morning that we need to go to the bathroom. That's the sort of the dialogue I'm talking about. That noise, right? It's just that my noise was extremely doubtful. It told me that I was worthless. Second guessed every decision that I made, every conversation that I had. Paranoia that people were talking about me. That thought process that we all have, except mine told me to end my life. Mine planted thoughts, plans, and ideas of suicide every single day, right throughout my early school years. As I mentioned, right from the very first time I had that fairly severe concussion.
Fuck. That's crazy how one concussion can kind of lead you down that path.
Well, multiple as well.
Yeah.
That's when I first remember it, right? But multiple. Again, I said I was playing as a 14, 15-year-old kid against men of a weekend that were in the late 90s trying to knock me head off.
Yeah, it all adds up.
It all adds up. And you got to get up, you got to dust yourself off. And, there wasn't a game as a young bloke. And even when I was playing in Sydney, there wasn't a game where No, I don't remember seeing stars. No, I wasn't knocked out, but you go in for collisions and this sort of thing happens. It used to be the old badge of honor. If you put the old sponge across your face and keep going. It definitely is not healthy. That's for sure.
No. But then now they just fake it and go off the field a lot of the times too, just so they can get an interchange.
Well, that, but also there's a hell of a lot of them that try and fake that they're okay and they're not.
Mm.
And you have a look at guys like Jake Friend and Boyd Cordner and the likes who've retired because of concussions. Looking and talking to some of the specialists that I've dealt with for a number of years now around this sort of stuff, we don't give the brain enough time to rest and heal from these concussions. So it's not a matter of the fact that these guys had too many concussions. It's a fact that we didn't let the brain recover. That's why the next concussion comes quicker.
Yeah, and it's hard when you play a contact sport and you're supposed to back up every week. So it's this constant head knocks.
And not just there, like on the footy field, on the boxing, the training paddock as well.
Mm.
When you're doing drills and there's no one there there's no cameras to pick up if you've been injured there. At training you might get a head knock and you just dust it off, get up and keep going.
Yeah.
So it's a multitude of many head contacts that impact long term of our brain function, cognition, but also our memory and our everyday well-being as well.
With that, and now you're obviously a father, do you want your kids playing, rugby league and contact sports now after what you've gone through with all the head knocks?
It's tough, because would I, if I had my chance over again, do it? I'd do exactly the same way that I did it. Do I want my kids to play? I want my kids to do whatever they want to do, but I can at least I'm a little bit more educated in the impacts of it. So I can have a look at their everyday behaviors after they get a decent concussion. So I'm going to make them sit out the time that they need to sit out. Where and parents just say, why don't you just give the kids a headgear? Well, it's actually not the headgear. It's actually not the impact of the head that does the damage. It's the brain's impact against the wall or the shell of the skull that does the damage. There's a brilliant scene from the movie Concussion with Will Smith when he talks about a small ball being inside a glass jar with water in it. There's the fluid around the brain, but when that ball inside hits the edges, it does damage to the brain.
Mm.
Now that film Concussion with Will Smith, and it forced me to retire from boxing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was confronting, man, because I was already seeing those side effects. I was living out. I was playing those side effects.
So you had memory loss and all that kind of stuff?
I don't remember much of yesterday.
Oh, really?
Literally now. That's why you might have known. I said, mate, make sure you send me a text, send me an email. Make sure those are the coping strategies to get through what I go through now. Mate, I'm a mess. And there's many other sports people that I know that don't talk about it publicly, that are the same. And would I do it all over again? Yeah. But can I say that it's not from footy? No way. Footy and boxing, I had the double whammy of it. So it's just about what we can do I'm not interested in whether it is or it isn't because I live it, right? I'm interested in how we heal it. That's the conversation I want to hear amplified. What can we do as far as rewiring the brain. There's research around neuroplasticity now, which is about recovery of neural pathways to help rewire memory, so forth like that. And different foods and exercises that you can do to actually help the brain and cognition and brain function. I take high concentrated fish oils every day. Again, it's about one, letting the brain rest, since I haven't been playing footy and haven't been boxing, but also letting it actually rewire itself. As I said and mentioned, neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself and heal itself is incredible.
How long do you think like it would take to heal? Like it, especially get harder as you get older too. Like it takes way longer.
Well, it's about learning new skills in
Mm.
layman's terms. What you do is, for me, right? And this is an example. Okay, I did a uni course in 2019 where I couldn't retain the knowledge with all the readings that I was doing. So I'd read it, and then the next day I had no idea what I read, right? And I couldn't recall on what it was, so I couldn't cite any information. I couldn't do it. So I was like, this is like, is it pointless? Why am I doing this? But because I was using my brain in a different way, whilst I wasn't retaining the information, what it was actually beginning the process in neuroplasticity, which was about rewiring the neural pathways. So then a month, 2 months, 6 months later, my memory's starting to fire again. It's starting to come back with different things. So although I couldn't retain the knowledge at the time, long term was actually doing this benefit. It was actually being beneficial towards me. So now it's about, if you've used your body or brain, if you've used your body the one way for a number of years, you're going to get good at that, right? It's about learning a new concept. So brain games like Sudoku, learning a new language, things like that really challenge the brain, helps to rewire, which helps to redevelop the neural pathways that have been damaged.
I guess it's just like a child when they begin to walk, like they're learning, and then now it's just second nature for us. Like we just walk normal. Like we don't have to think
Exactly
about it.
right. Exactly right. I do a lot of work around brain development and early childhood stuff, and we're talking millions of neurons being formed in the first few years of their lives. Millions. They don't just do it when you're asleep, so they're doing it as you're living now. So again, as you just said, a new skill is learning to walk, right, is actually good for your brain and the cognition of your brain. So doing new things like learning to skip, learning to be coordinated with boxing, not getting punched in the head, but actual boxing and learning new things, learning a new language, writing with your other hand, things like that are all super beneficial for your brain cognition.
And it's like footy, like most people can only pass one way. But if you practice to pass the other way, you shit at the beginning, but then you
You're going to
eventually
get
get
good at it.
better. Yeah.
You're going to get good at it, and it's just practice. That's all it is.
Yeah. I've always been interested in the brain and psychology and that. It's amazing what the brain can do.
It's amazing what the brain could do, but what we know about the brain is about the size of a pinhead. So it's amazing what we don't know about the brain of what it can do, right? The brain's untapped potential is amazing. So it's, there's loads and loads of stuff happening now around the world around, what the actual brain can do, So it's really cool to see and start to learn about that, understand that.
Yeah, it's bloody crazy. And to think in, 20, 30 years time, even 50 years time, how much more of the brain like we'll be able to unlock and tap into.
It's exciting times, man. Like all of that. And they're the sort of podcasts I listen to. They're the sort of things that I try and learn about and go down the rabbit holes of trying to learn about these sort of stuffs, so I can help it, but also so I can help myself.
Exactly. Now, did you have a attempt on your life? Was it 2012?
Yeah, 2012, as I mentioned earlier, it was a really, really dark place for me. On the back of the constant noise in the head, but then marriage breakdown, separation in new partnership. Really, really challenging time. Struggling with addiction throughout my career, getting clean and sober. Once I got clean and sober, what I realized I was doing was using substance to band-aid the noise for so long. Take the band-aid away, and the noise gets turned back up again. So I had to learn how to manage and function with what I was going through, and it took me to some really, really dark places. And it got to the point where I tried everything within the power of my two hands to not be sitting in front of you today talking. It was a dark place, man. It was a really, really tough place, and I'm thankful that something bigger than me kept me here. Because if I had it my way, I wouldn't be sitting here. Right? Back in that day, if I had it my way, if things had gone to plan for me that day, I wouldn't be sitting here talking. Something bigger than me kept me here. As I said, I tried everything within the power of my two hands to not be here anymore. Something bigger than me kept me here.
What do you think that was?
Well, for me as an Aboriginal man, I have no doubt that for me and my belief systems, and I don't push my belief systems on anyone, but we talk about the ancestors, we talk about our creators, and without doubt, I think they put their hands on me and said, "It's not your time yet." Again, different belief systems around the world, which I'm respectful of. But for me, it was the old people. They put their hand and said, "You're not, it's not your time yet, boy." It's one of those things where the two most important days of your life are the day you're born, then the day you find out why you're born. I believe I had to go to that dark place to find out why I was here. I've thought for a long time it was about football. I thought for a long time it was about boxing. But I realised that for me, my life's purpose is about helping other people, and how I do that and how I'll continue to do that, is a challenge for me for the rest of my life. For me, I'm super grateful that, again, what I tried to do didn't work, and I'm sitting here to be able to have impact on other people's lives.
I love that you share that, because so many people look at, rugby league players or other high profile people and don't think that they go through the struggles of mental health and all that kind of stuff. But really they do. And on the other side of that, there's actually way more to life than just your sport, because most people only play a few years or max 10 or 15, and then you still got the rest of your life to live. There's so much more to life than just playing sport.
It was a job.
Mm.
That's it. People go and have a job for 10 years and then they get pulled off that path onto another job for the next 10 years. Football was my job. Like a lot of other guys who retire from footy, they struggle because, footy forms an identity for us, right? And once you realize that it was just a job, you went to work every day, you train, part of your job was train, part of your job was to play. It's not actually part of it's a football for me was a stepping stone to get to where I am, no doubt. I'm super thankful that I went down that path, but it wasn't the be all and end all, because, as I said, it's just a job. And with the NRL, with a lot of big sports, it's a production line that you get used, chewed up, and spat out. That's the brute honesty of it. It's one of those things where there's an expiry date. Life, we've got an expiry date. There's going to be a day when my expiry date's up and I'm looking at it in the face and not going to be here anymore. We've all got an expiry date, whether it's our job, our relationship, our life. We've all got an expiry date.
Exactly. Now, you're a proud Indigenous man, and I'm really interested by culture. And I feel like, is the Aboriginal culture, if I'm right, one of the longest lasting cultures in the world? Is that correct?
It's science documented as science documented as the oldest continual culture of mankind on the earth.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing.
when people talk about Aboriginal culture, people talk about Aboriginal people, like the oldest existence of mankind started here in Australia. That's something to be proud of, man, not to knock,
Yeah.
not to put down for people. It's something to want to learn about. You know, we go over and we connect with these different belief systems all over the world. And the oldest one before all of those is right here. That's special.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like as a white Australian, like we don't really have a culture. And then we look at, Aboriginal and the rest of the world, like they have heaps of cultures. What do you think, what about your culture do you love the most and what helps you like really connect to it?
It gives me a grounding. You know, for a long time, I was I was a kid who was too black to be white and too white to be black. I didn't fit in either world. But once I realized and sat with it and started to learn and listen to them old people, listen to the elders, I realized that identity wasn't about what I looked like. You know, my identity was about my behaviors. My identity was about how I treat other people. And when you look at and strip it all back, within Aboriginal culture, we talk so much about our stories. You know, some people call them dreamtime stories, the dreaming. We've got a story for everything. We've got a story for everything that was here and has been here forever, right? If there isn't a story to it, it tells you it wasn't here. So when we talk about suicide, right, in over 500 separate nation groups, right, 500 separate nations, tribes, countries that we call in this land now called Australia, there was 2,500 different dialects of language. In over 2,500 different dialects of language, there's no word that means suicide, right? So if there's no word that describes what it is, it tells you it wasn't here, right? So for thousands and thousands of years, again, now science documented 20,000, 40,000, 60,000, 80,000. The last I heard was 120,000. We know it's even longer than that. We've got stories that predate the megafauna with cave paintings and so forth. Science will eventually catch up to know that we've been here since the beginning of time.
That's great. It's a deep and rich culture. Why do you think it's very important for, I guess, the young fellas, especially like if they live in the city, to connect with the culture in the land?
We got to understand what culture is for many people is different, right? But
Yeah.
culture for me is about the stories.
Yeah.
Right. And you have a look at all those stories that I talked to you about. Stories about birds, stories about the wind, stories about the waters, stories about everything. Right? Stories about people, stories about everything. All of those stories, right? How the birds got their colors, Tiddalik the frog, all of those sort of stories are all stories about how we should behave. Right? Those stories have lessons. Those stories have values. So the most important thing for me about our culture is the stories, because they tell us how we should be behaving in the community. And all of those stories have elements of love, care, respect, humility, compassion, helping people, sharing with each other. You know, those are the ways that we should be living. And it don't matter if you're in the middle of Sydney, you can live with those stories. You can live with those values and how we treat people. We're not living with those values today in society. Society's fast-paced and you know, a very capitalist and singular world where it's about want, and build, and capture as much wealth as we can. Again, I told you we were always about sharing with other people before we shared with anyone. You know, so don't matter where you live, you can live with those values. Don't matter who you are, what race, color, religion, whatever. Everyone can live with those values.
Yeah. Why do you think a lot of, I'm not stereotyping, but a lot of Indigenous people go down a path of drugs and alcohol and crime and stuff, especially in the city areas. Is that maybe lost connections to their culture?
Well, it's a lot. It's many things, right? So you look at what those are. Okay, those things are introduced to this new world too. Okay, this new world that we live in now has only been here for 230 plus years, right? And we have lived on this earth for at least 120,000, right? So in the last 200, so you just look at suicide, right? So 100,000 plus years, there was none. We've gone from zero to among the highest in the world in 200 years, right? So it tells you what we were doing was working. What we're doing now isn't working, right? We've gone from zero to the highest in the world, right? And then you have a look at those behaviors. Those behaviors around alcoholism and addiction and even violence, right? They're all very, very introduced behaviors, right? Because we had substance, but it was natural substance, herbal substance that was used ceremonial, right? That wasn't overused in the wrong way. Otherwise, we would have seen addicts everywhere, right? So it shows you that when that native cultures around the world, not just our cultures, but native cultures around the world, you look at psychedelics in some of the different countries around the world as well, and you look at, they were used for ceremonial purposes, right? So for us, again, there's having a story for everything. No stories around addiction, right? No stories around suicide. So if we're living these very introduced behaviors, the way to not live with those behaviors is to go back to the way that we used to live. Now, I'm not saying go out and live in the bush and live off the land and all that sort of stuff. I'm a hunter and gatherer by all means. I just do it at Woolworths every week, right? So it's about learning to walk in two worlds. We've got Aboriginal people right across the country who are struggling to walk in two worlds. Now, along the East Coast, very competent, very adaptive to the new world, right? Of going to work and going to school and getting an education. And again, that wasn't a thing for us. So we're very adapted to that. But a lot of us on the East Coast don't have the language that our old people have, don't have the ceremony that our old people have, don't have the cultural behaviors that our old people have. So we're strong in one world and not strong in the other. Then you go to different parts of the country, in the northern parts of the country, they are super strong in language, super strong in culture, super strong in ceremony, knowing who they are, their totem systems, all of that. But then they might struggle in the Western world, right? The new introduced world. So it's just about finding a balance between both worlds. As I said, we're strong in one world and not the other. So what we need to do is find balance to live and walk with a foot in each camp. Otherwise, it's going to be a struggle for us.
Is that the kind of work you do, helping people, balance walking in both those worlds?
Yeah, it is. And how I do that is by relating it back to the stories. We always talk about those stories, and I say, well, those stories were about looking after each other. Those stories were about showing compassion for people. Those stories were about sharing with each other. Again, a very modern world, a capitalist world, doesn't do that stuff. Right. So if we what we want to do, and what I talk to kids about culture and talk to people about culture, is that there was a meaning for everything with story, that had a story attached to it. We're going to start to learn those stories, so we start to learn the meanings, the values, and the lessons.
Wow, that is actually so interesting. Like, I knew.
Look. All right. So here's another thing, right?
Yeah.
People think that Aboriginal culture is about dance. People think that Aboriginal culture is about artworks. People think that Aboriginal culture is about song, right? All of those sort of things around corroborating and so forth like that. But you have a look at it, man. Like, all the dancers emulate a story. All the artworks tell you a story. All of the stories have lessons and behaviors and values of life. So Aboriginal culture, whilst the visual of it looks fantastic and spectacular with how the beauty of artworks and, walking country and making, coolamans and shields and things like that. It's the process that's the culture. And the process is about storytelling. Right? So all of these things like corroborees and dance and artworks and things like that, they're the end process of culture, the end product of culture. We need to learn the process and start to identify that the process was always about the lessons and the behaviors and the values of how we should behave.
Wow. And that's why they say storytelling is the most powerful tool.
Man, and the thing is, right, we didn't write stuff down. Right? We didn't write stuff down, but we drew it in artworks. All of our cave paintings, they're all about stories. When they're sitting there telling them for hours, what do you think they're doing when they're drawing those artworks on the walls of the caves? They were sitting there telling the story, but what do you think they were doing when they were doing that? They were present. The moment of presence is about mindfulness. Not living in the head, in the future, or the past is where the chaos is. So that's why we never had suicides. That's why we never had disruption to our well-being, because everything we did, we had presence. And why we didn't? For the people following along at home, what I'm doing is pointing to my watch, right? The wristwatch. Time. There was no concept of time. Right? Because we ate when we were hungry, we drank when we were thirsty, we went to sleep when we were tired, we woke up when we weren't tired. Right? Time in itself creates so much dramas in our head because we've always got to be somewhere at a certain time. We always have a deadline to meet at a certain time. Worrying about the future causes anxiety. Worrying about the past causes depression. Things that happen to us in our past, we get upset and down on. Things we're going to worry about looking too far forward, we get anxiety about. So time, just have to learn to live now. Don't worry about what's going to happen in the future. It's going to take care of itself. I bet you in the middle of 2019, before COVID hit, no one knew that we were going to be checking in to every supermarket we went into. No one knew that there was going to be a hugely divisive debate around whether you should get vaccines or not. Nobody knew that we weren't allowed to travel on a plane without a mask on. Nobody determines that. Right? So what we need to do is just be present. Just be present, and the path will take care of itself. We just have to adapt, learn to innovate and adapt. Whatever hits us in the front, and whatever hits us in each moment.
I love that. That's powerful. And it's just like every time I go in the bush, bro, I lose track of time. It's like I come out and it's like, what? It's been like 3-4 hours. It didn't even feel like that. You just totally lose track and you're just present and you're enjoying yourself and all this. You have no stress. And that's why I love going in the bush as much as possible, because it's a massive stress reliever for me.
Well, there's science to that as well. Is that when we take our shoes off, some people call it earthing now. Man, our people were, inverted commas, earthing for thousands and thousands of years because we never had no shoes.
Yeah.
But there's natural radiating energies that come from the earth. When you take your shoes off and sink your feet into the dirt. We need to spend more time in nature, more time connecting skin to the earth, our feet to the earth, our hands and our feet in the earth. Because there's healing natures involved in that.
Yeah, it's the simple things in life that, as I said, we don't do because we're stuck in the hustle and bustle. But I think that is a good thing about COVID, because it has allowed a lot of people to take a step back and really connect with themselves.
Slow down, connect with themselves, connect with their families. That's been the best thing about it. Is that more parents are spending more time with their kids than ever. They're actually giving some credit to their school teachers and realizing that hey, maybe my son's not the angel that I thought he was, when they're having to homeschool themselves 5 days a week.
Yeah.
It's what it's doing. It's bringing families back together, but which can have some challenges as well.
Mm. There's a question I wanted to ask you around the national anthem, and I'm curious to know why a lot of Indigenous people don't sing it.
Why do
What
you sing it?
I've just grown up and I was just taught to sing it. Really, that's a good question.
So you just followed what everyone else did.
Yeah, we were just taught in school that that's our national anthem and we sing it.
But why? How old are you?
24.
So I'm 38 years of age.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, we sang "God Save the Queen." It wasn't adopted as a national song until 1984. Right? The song itself is a 5-verse song written by a Scotsman about England.
Oh, is it?
Now, that's the 5-verse song again, right? So he's been asking you as an Australian fella, why do you sing the national anthem? You can't answer me. And you don't even know the roots of where the song's from.
No, you got me
Right?
there.
We sit and we have all this pride. Oh, it's the national anthem, our soldiers fought for that song and, they went to war. The last, again, I'm sure that soldiers, if they were over there, and I'm not making judgments here at all about anything, and I've had this discussion with veterans and so forth, and if they're faced with a choice of coming home to see their family in the face of combat, right? The last thing they're going to worry about is a song. If they're going to come home and see their kids or not. There's so many more dangerous things that happen to them, and thankful for what they do. I couldn't do it. No way. I can't play paintball, right? Let alone get in the road of a real bullet. But people don't realise that the Australian national anthem is a 5-verse song written by a Scotsman about England. Literally, it talks about sailing across the seas coming from England. So it's not that it doesn't represent me. It don't represent you either. Right? So why a lot of First Nation people choose not to sing it is for that reason. And again, let's look at pre-1967 when the national referendum and our people were excluded from the Flora and Fauna Act. Right? That's my mum and dad's lifetime. In my lifetime, we sang God Save the Queen. So a lot of Aboriginal people don't sing it is because it's not a representation of us. But we weren't classed as citizens prior to 67. The song wasn't adapted as a national anthem till 84. So I say to people all the time, it's not that it doesn't represent me, it don't represent you either. So let's have a conversation about what an actual song, if you want a song, like for me to have friends in this country and be proud of this country, I don't need a song to tell me. I think we have this false patriotism in this country that a lot of people don't even know what it's about and just cop it on the chin because people told them to do that without thinking for themselves. Right? If you want a song to unite a country, because again, I cops all sorts of rubbish about it, and people say you're trying to divide the country. I'm like, hello, it's never been one. Non-Indigenous people, came out in chains from England in 1788, and the First Nation people were forced to live a certain way of life. We just had a conversation about how much culture you love and are intrigued by culture. Yet I could tell you everything about you because that's all we've ever learned. It's only ever been a one-way street in this country. We need to have a two-way street. If we're going to have a relationship between people, we need to have a two-way relationship. We talk about reconciliation. To reconcile is to heal a broken relationship. We've never had a relationship. It's time to start a relationship. And if you need a song to start a relationship, there's plenty of people out there that get paid more money than me to write a new song. No, there's some fantastic renditions. I send a lot of people to. It's a version by Uncle Kutcher Edwards. And the lyrics are by Judith Durham from the Seekers. I'm pretty sure. If you have a chance of that, look that up. And you might want to put it in your show notes. That song is a beautiful song. It talks about the first people. It talks about people who come in here as migrants. It talks about a modern Australia. But we have so many people jumping up and down, talking about division in the country. The country is further from being united than it ever has. What we need to do is start to have a conversation about what we can do to unite a country.
What do you think we should do?
I think we should, and it starts in the schools, right? If we've got mandate laws about schools, kids going to schools, it starts in the schools. You know, we need to have our kids learning about the truth. And the truth can be uncomfortable because that means that the non-Indigenous people, that's their ancestors that raped and killed men, women, and children in this country. That is an uncomfortable truth. That there's this great lie that people think that this country was built on, you know, the pastoralism in this country, and you know the farmers that worked hard and built our country. Mate, our slaves built this country. Aboriginal people that were forced to work as slaves were the ones who built this country. And for the people who were lucky enough to be born into land and property, which has created generational wealth for today's society, we weren't accustomed to that when we were slaves on this country. There's a brilliant documentary on Sunday night, actually, Incarceration Nation. You know, and you might need to just check that it's the 29th at 8:30 on NITV. I'm pretty sure it's Incarceration Nation. But you know, that talks about the truth of this country. It talks about the truth of this country, and what we need to do is to start having the uncomfortable conversations, because I believe that there's a stack load of non-Aboriginal people that go, you know what, I can't believe that happened. And then that'll bring an empathy, and empathy brings understanding, and understanding will bridge the divide.
Exactly. And like, I think thinking back now to when I was at school, I didn't really learn about the Indigenous culture. I think the most I did was watch that movie, The Rabbit Proof Fence.
Yeah. What was that about?
That was like the story of what the 2 or 3 girls that got stolen and trying to find their way back home. The story of
Again, think about the thousands of people that were stolen and taken and put into missions, into children's homes, away from country, that would never see their parents again, that would never see their brothers and sisters again, that there was this toxic rape culture that was involved in those systems. How do you think we got mixed blood? How do you think we got lighter skin? You know, a lot of the time it was forced, right? And these are the confronting conversations that we need to have. right? Because again, non-Indigenous people, that's your people, man, that did that. That's going to be uncomfortable for some people. We don't blame anyone now, all right? We don't blame you. But white people get a privilege of non-judgment in this country. Right? We wake up every single day of the week and get judged.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I've never thought about it like that before, especially around the national anthem. That, as I said, like, we just learnt it in school, and I've sung it ever since. And for you to tell me that, it's kind of embarrassing to know that I didn't even know about our own song and you did. So thank you for sharing that.
And it's one of these things that, and again, like, I was at an age too where I just copped it on the chin because that's what everyone did. And then I got old enough to think for myself and started to do the research around this sort of stuff. You know, you don't believe me? Go and check it after this show. Google it. It's all there. All the information's there now. Or we don't make up this stuff. All the talk about sexual misconduct and some of the massacres were all documented in the early settlers' journals. That's all there, public knowledge for everyone to go and learn about.
I think because it happened so long ago, we tend to just forget about it.
Well, how long ago?
I don't know. How long was it?
Stolen generation was only 30, 40 years ago, man.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. And we're looking at kids being removed at a higher rate now with the child protection system than the stolen generation. Because families are seen as not looking after their kids because they're in the cycle of poverty because they didn't inherit land like others. And again, we're adapting and learning to live a new way of life. If we were overtaken by another country tomorrow and you were forced to speak a different language, you were forced to not eat the way that you eat, you were forced to not do the practices that you practice, you were forced to live a completely new way of life, how do you reckon you'd go?
Yeah, I'd struggle.
Mate, that's all we've been doing.
Yeah.
230 years, that ain't a great deal of generations ago. My parents are born in the 60s. Their parents might have been born in the 20s. That's my grandparents. And my great-grandparents might have been born in the late 1800s. You know what I mean? It's only 5 generations ago. It ain't all that long ago.
No, it's not. Shit. It's crazy to think how naive we are to it all. Fuck.
Well, it's just you don't understand.
Yeah.
You don't know because you've never had to know. And again, when we talk about white privilege, that's a privilege that you've never, ever, ever had to learn about that. We've had to learn about it because of our behaviors that stem from somewhere else, because of our conditioning to be scared of police, because we don't see the police, the boys in blue. What we see is the government man trying to steal our children away.
Wow.
If you're a dad, what would you do to protect your kids?
Fucking anything.
Oh, mate. Now you can understand and empathize a little bit more around some behaviors towards certain parts of the community.
Yeah. Wow. Man, thank you for sharing that. Like, as I said, a lot of us, white privilege, we're naive to it all. And by you sharing this story, it's opened my mind up a lot, and I'm sure it's going to open up a lot of the listeners' minds as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Mate, always here to disrupt.
So all the work you do with Enemy Within, what made you want to start that?
It's about helping other people, mate. Once I realised that I got a second chance at life, for me, I've got to start to reach out and help some people who are struggling as well. Because when I started to talk about how much I was hurting and the stuff I was going through mentally and emotionally, the amount of people that reached out to me and said, you know what, Joe, I've just never had the courage to say it because I thought people would judge me. So when I started firstly to talk about it, it was about normalizing a conversation around mental and emotional pain. And we're still not at a point where everyone shares that. But it's about opening a conversation and getting people comfortable enough to be able to, share pain, to be able to sit honestly with themselves. And the enemy within is about giving people tools to be able to navigate their way through tough times.
That's awesome. And is that just by running workshops and going into schools and stuff, or?
Right? All sorts of things. It's about, counseling individuals. It's by, giving keynote presentations. It's by helping people to learn about themselves, creating awareness and education around history like we've just done for the last 20 minutes. It's all sorts of things, but essentially it's about helping people to better understand themselves, to better understand their mind, so they can live with a bit of peace within their own mind.
Yeah. Well, I know we've kind of gone a bit over time, so we'll start to wrap it up quickly. So last few questions. What does having a better life mean to you?
It's about showing others a better life. Better life to me means less chaos in my head and doing the things that I need to do to make sure that happens. And when I'm doing that, I'm modeling behaviors that my kids will see. I'm modeling behaviors that other people will see, to help them then choose better choices with their life.
How do you define success?
I don't. What's
Yeah.
success? What's success?
Mm.
Success is a term or a scale that's been newly adapted to this country and has put people on a level of hierarchy. Well, my culture was never about hierarchy. Our culture was always about sitting in a circle where everyone can see everyone and everyone's on the same level. Success, what success to each and people might say I've been a successful sports person, but I didn't do anywhere near the stuff that I wanted to do. So what success looks like for you and what success looks like for me are two completely different things. I just say everyone should be the best version of themselves.
Yeah. That's kind of my definition is, being happy and striving to be the best version of you. That's how I define it. Last question. When your time's all up and done in this earth, what would you like to be remembered for?
I get asked this a lot. All I want written on my headstone, and people can refer to this if they don't know what to write on it. Here lies a good man that tried to do his best for everyone. Am I a leader? I'm not sure I'm a leader. I talk about the difference between a leader and a shepherd. A leader tells people what to do. A shepherd walks with people and shows them how to do it. So for me, how I'd like to be remembered is someone who learnt a lot from his mistakes and did his best to help other people not make those mistakes.
Powerful. Well, Joe, man, this chat has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to really jump on. I really appreciate it, eh?
Did you press record? It would be a bummer if we didn't capture some of that, man.
It's all right. I've had that happen before. Fuck. But yeah, thank you so much, man.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And thanks for reaching out. And sorry we didn't get it done sooner. A few different things jump in the way, but mate, I'm a believer in everything's supposed to happen when it's supposed to happen at the exact time it's supposed to happen. And we were due to meet today, brother, and connect on many different and little deep topics here and there.
Yeah, I've loved it. I love these deep conversations, man. It's really got me thinking and opened my mind. So thank you.
Thanks, brother. Thanks a lot.
Quickly though, for all the listeners, where's the best place to find you on social media?
On socials, on Instagram, on at Joe Williams _ TEW. So JOEWILLIAMS _ T for the, E for enemy, W for within, at Joe Williams _ TEW on Instagram and Twitter. And on my Facebook, it's The Enemy Within, Suicide Prevention, Mental Health and Trauma Education.
You got that down, Pat. Thank you once again for all the listeners. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.